Principia Theologica, Lecture 12, Logical Proof of Christianity. Okay, so the last lecture was called Logical Proof of God, where, I gave what the title suggests, a logical proof of God. And this proof, I didn't state the full proof in the last lecture because I didn't mention too much of the physics. So it's a scientific proof with a scientific theory of God. But of course it has to be more than just science, because God is more than just science. It also has to be moral. It also has to be connected to the human soul and the health of the human soul. And it also has to be connected to human society at large. Because, God is not a purely scientific entity. His aims aren't purely scientific. A purely scientific theory won't say anything about spirituality or human morality or human society. So, new understandings of God always bring about societal change for the better. And the fact that society changes for the better is taken as evidence for the existence of God, who's ultimately considered the source of these ideas. Not necessarily that he puts the ideas in our mind directly, but that the ideas become obvious to us once we reach a certain level of intelligence. Okay. So that's really how Bibles work. A Bible is a picture of the universe that includes, it depends on different Bibles. Many different Bibles have been written. But they always include some essential characteristics. That is some theory of the universe. And then some description of God, the characteristics of God. The rules on existence that God or the mind of the universe has imposed on existence. So there can be scientific rules, but also moral rules. So moral rules for humans, and also plans for, the most basic principles for constructing society. Okay. So most Bibles, or most, canonical Bibles, include those characteristics. So our new understanding of God is going to imply new principles for society. And so what I'm going to claim in this lecture is that the new principles that we need to start following in society, in large numbers. It's very, religions don't work, or, religious change, moral change for a species doesn't work if only one or two people are involved. Religions change the world when, large numbers of people believe in the same things at the same time. So I'm going to suggest that the principles that modern society need to follow, align themselves with, I'm going to suggest that we already have those principles, and those principles are what we would call the moral teachings of Jesus Christ. So that's something different than Christianity. Christianity is a church. Jesus had nothing to do with that church. Well, he inspired it, but it didn't exist until decades after he died. In the gospel, he orders Peter to found and build his church, but that doesn't begin until after Jesus is dead. And Jesus, if you'd asked him what religion he belonged to, he would have said he was a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. He just had new ways of interpreting Jewish law, and because he was so much better at interpreting it, and you can read the arguments that they had in the Gospels, Jesus was just better at quoting the Old Testament to prove his ideas. He was better at doing that. He did it more logically and with less hypocrisy than the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who he was going up against in his arguments. That's for ancient Jews, the Gospels of Christ were like more like a mathematical proof than just a story, because Jesus is constantly quoting the Old Testament to prove who he is, and to prove his new understanding of God. And of course, because he's doing it better than the Pharisees and Sadducees, and because he's saying such revolutionary things, such as that women should be forgiven for committing adultery, for example, which was way too ahead of his time. That Jewish men back then just wouldn't be able to accept that. So of course they killed him. Not that he'd done anything wrong. So there's Christianity, which is a church, and that church often doesn't have very much to do with genuine Christianity as Jesus taught it. As evidence, you have some, well, I won't get into it, but you have some strange, Christianity is all about sharing and caring and stuff. And then you have the leading representatives of Christianity live in a very immense palace full of treasure, while people sleep outside on the streets. That's a house of many rooms. But what was I thinking though? Yeah, so I'm going to suggest that we have the new societal principles already. Like Moses came down with the law. These were guiding principles for human society. Moses had realized that because this was in polytheistic times, he realized that all the tribal gods had some set of common rules. And then he reasoned, if every tribal god sets these particular rules, they must be coming from a higher source, because the tribal gods the individual tribal gods aren't inventing them themselves, because they always come up with the same ones. So that's how Moses proved polytheism to himself. And he came down from the Mount Sinai, with the laws, the 10 Commandments, which were their rules for societies to follow. And people found them so reasonable, and people, this is in simpler times, where this was before the existence of law, so there was literally no verbal law. Oh, well, that's not true. That's not true. That's wrong. There would have been verbal law. But his were considered much better, much simpler, more logical, and they seemed to come from a higher source. And then people tried them in their societies, and it made society better, if not perfect. It didn't make society perfect, but it made it a lot better. And that's why people only choose to follow rules if they actually make your life better. That's also why people followed Muhammad, because the way he was suggesting to live, and that's all the Quran is, or more than anything, the Quran is telling Muslims how to live their life and how to structure their society. It's an amazing book, but it's a whole lot about social reform. It's very practical, as beautiful as it is, as amazing as the language is. It's also very, very, very practical. You'd be shocked how practical it is, actually, if you read it. And people followed Muhammad, and it became the biggest religion in the world before very long. And it's still one of the world's strongest religions. People followed it because people followed Muhammad's advice. Society had got much more complicated by then. That's why instead of just 10 commandments, you need a whole book of commandments, which is what the Quran is. People followed the commandments given in the Quran, and society improved. And not only did society improve, there was a renaissance. And for the next few hundred years, Europe went into a dark age, but the people following the Quran had a renaissance and invented a whole load of maths and a whole load of new art and new philosophy and a whole lot of new science. And were responsible for maintaining a lot of knowledge that humanity might have lost due to the during the European philosophical dark ages. So I'm going to suggest that this time, with our new understanding of God, by way of my theories of God, this time the societal rules are simple, really simple, like Moses simple. In fact, I think even simpler than Moses' laws. And we already have the societal commandments, and those commandments are the moral teachings of Jesus Christ. So not the religion Christianity. So I don't give a damn about religion. If someone asked me, I'd say I'm a Christian, but I'd say I'm just as much a a Hindu, because I think the first time I found God plausible, it was on coming to understand the Bhagavad Gita and the picture of God painted there. I think that was my first theoretical approach to God, and then after that it was the Christian Gospels and the logic of Jesus. And but I was christened as a baby and raised Catholic, so my upbringing is Christian. More than it's any other religion. Then I also read the Quran and the Old Testament, and reading the Quran made me realize, Muhammad is talking about exactly the same God. So Jesus was a Jew, talking about the Jewish God, that's one God. So all Christians and Jews believe in the same God. And then Muhammad said, I'm talking about exactly the same God as Moses and Abraham. And he even calls Jesus' teachings, he calls them proofs. He considered Jesus' teachings so correct. This is Muhammad I'm talking about now. He considered, or the Prophet I should say, he considered the teachings of Jesus so divinely correct that he considered them proofs of the existence of Allah. And he was just adding to these proofs for the time, for the society that he was in, which was a different society than Jesus's. So, yeah, I consider, like when atheists say, which God should I believe in? Should I believe in the Jewish God, or the God or the God of Jesus, or the God of Muhammad? I say yes, that's what God you should believe in. That's exactly the one, yeah. And that God is immense and eternal, and has also been described by the ancient Hindus in the Bhagavad Gita and other texts, the Upanishads. And it's also been described by Guru Nanak. And of course, if God exists, God is going to be described multiple times at different times in different parts of the world by different societies. And of course, they're not going to agree exactly on what God is, because they're living in different cultures. So they have different lenses different psychological lenses over their eyes as they look at God. So they paint a different picture. But what's in common is God, and what's different is culturally contingent. Culturally contingent, and therefore much less meaningful. So, now our new understanding of God is actually leading us back to Christianity. And this is not to say people become Christians, not at all. This does not mean to say you need to get baptized, not at all. You don't have to do anything Christian. You can be a total atheist and follow this type of Christianity just because it's the most logical thing for humans to do. So nothing to do with religion. And even if you're an atheist, you're welcome to partake in this, new modern 21st, 22nd century? 22nd century Christianity. Which is a type of Christianity where you don't even have to believe in God or Christ. Like, even if you don't believe God exists, that's fine. Even if you don't believe that Jesus ever existed, there are still teachings about how people should treat each other in the gospel, and whoever wrote those teachings was a genius. So, and they're still just obviously correct. So now what we do is we take a look around modern Western society, and we see that Christianity solves every single problem. It's just and I mean real Christianity, real, honest, systematic, cultural and societal Christianity, like a redirecting of entire countries. A transformation of political institutions, a transformation away from corruption towards genuine Christianity. So we look at society around us, and we see that Christianity is like the moral teachings of Jesus Christ, which are really clear. These moral teachings are so clear that a purple dinosaur taught them to a lot of children when, Barney the dinosaur, Barney the dinosaur is Jesus Christ for like toddlers. Because he solves every single problem they encounter with Christianity. So I'm suggesting that society needs to do the same. And once we see that Christianity, and I mean level-headed, rational, scientific Christianity, once we see that scientifically employed Christianity solves all of our problems, we'll be inspired to be more like that. We won't be perfect, but to be more like that. We'll see society improve as we try, and it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy where we're like, oh, Christianity is right. Even if God and Jesus don't exist, Christianity is still right. So that's why we're going to do it, and lo and behold, before long, you'll be much happier because the world will be a much fairer and safer place. But again, it has to be carried out by large numbers of people. Not everyone, but large numbers. So I guess we apply it to a few situations. Well, then again, for me, it comes down to because we want to be practical and not airy-fairy. We want to deal with society as it is today and deal with the real issues. So what are the real issues? Like I've already spoken about in the God experiment, obviously each person needs to systematically address their own morality, but that's your own art project. How you go about doing that, which religious texts you use, how you meditate, whether you, take ayahuasca or do something like that, because a lot of people do things like that. I never have. I don't know if I would. Sounds a bit scary. But maybe I would. I don't know. But whatever, your own personal morality is your own spiritual art project. But then the society as a whole. So again, I want to talk, like I talked about in the last lecture, it will center around the voting profile. So this is just us acknowledging that society, let's be frank, this is modern society at the moment, 2021, as led by America, who are the cultural leaders of the world. We've done a lot of good as a country, but you know what America's a bit like now? It's a bit like that meme where there's two Nazis are there, and then they're kind of looking back and forth from one another, and they're just like, are we the bad guys? That meme. I'm sure you've seen that meme. I don't want to be mean. I like America. But it's just, you're the leaders. So, and you're the most observed country in the world. And, it's been a pretty, well, you put on a hell of a show for a few decades anyway. As someone who hasn't been there and has been watching from the outside. And at the moment, my good God, and it's not just you at all, it's Europe as well, but modern culture, come on. Let's get real. This is atrocious. It's irrational, it's scared, it's embarrassing is what it is. I think this is a dark age, right? So, and I think having studied history, I know there's only one thing that comes out of a dark age, and that's a renaissance. And I don't think we need an artistic renaissance. I think we need a spiritual renaissance, and we need a moral renaissance, where we actually start trying a little bit. There's a bit of kind of not trying and giving into our weakest, basest, lowest impulses kind of is a bit generalized throughout society. And then there's corruption and greed, basically. So corruption and greed are the big issues in America. Some terrible examples of it, the healthcare system, there's just, a country as wealthy as America, to treat your own citizens, to treat your fellow Americans like that. And it's just, if you're poor, it's then your fellow American says to you, if you're American, and just don't get poor if you're American, because your fellow American will turn to you and say, "Fuck you." If your fellow American has so much money, he just squanders it on things. You get sick, fuck you. That's fuck you money. That's what you call it. And that's your attitude to each other. But here's the thing, we've got to stop blaming politicians, for their greed as if they're abnormal. No, they're normal Americans, and they've just wound up in politics. Like a big problem in the modern world is trying to find whose fault it is when it's everyone's fault. So that's why there's so many witch hunts. But it gets us nowhere, and things just get worse, because ultimately it's everyone's fault, and equally. And I think that can be shown mathematically. I think I can show, using a statistical analysis of karma, using a scientific model of suffering and the dissipation of suffering, or the diffusion of suffering through societal systems, that we can show that mathematically that it is all approximately, that how much modern society is your fault is approximately how much it is my fault, with mathematical precision. But that's statistical precision. So it doesn't mean karma doesn't work perfectly and exactly. And yeah, sometimes bad things happen to good people, but sometimes good things happen to good people. And it's much more, statistically, it happens much more often that good things happen to good people. So yeah, the scapegoatism, like Trump was a scapegoat, for example. He was just honest about his greed. The fact is, Americans would prefer to buy cars and shoes, and just generally speaking, cars and shoes and phones, and just have lots of savings, and diamonds, shiny rocks, this obsession with shiny rocks, obsession with watches, just so you can be like, oh, I have it, just to show off that you have it. So basically, there's a kind of societal pervasive immorality in America that's the root cause of all the sadness, and that is kind of the squandering of money, while there are people in genuine and innocent need. There's one thing for someone to be in need and you don't give them anything because you need the money, and then you walk past someone begging and you can't give them anything because you need it for yourself. You need it for your house, you need it for your shopping, and you feel sorry for the guy, but maybe you're going out for a drink with friends and you need the money for drinks, and you're not going to give up your drink money to every beggar you see, because life is hard enough as it is, and you need a drink to just keep going, for example. There's that type of not giving, okay, which most everyone is, that's, you got to live your life. If you gave to everyone, then you wouldn't be able to live, you'd be homeless yourself. So you try and give as much as you can, but that's a judgment call on your part. But then there's kind of having, because in America now, many people have monstrous amounts of cash, and there's this craze at the moment of just buying things so that you can show that you have them. Okay, and that's fair enough. People's hobbies are their hobbies, but that would be fine if it weren't for the amount of suffering and poverty that could so easily be alleviated. So, and for me, because people might think I'm heading towards communism. No, I'm not heading towards communism. I'm heading towards, having a human conscience, and the suggestion that the solution isn't political. The solution is large-scale moral change. Because, one Christian is useless. One person genuinely acting like a Christian is useless. There's just too much to be done. What we need is large numbers of people actively pursuing Christianity in terms of forgiveness, tolerance, understanding, compassion, love, and helping the sick and the needy. Because in America, when there is enough wealth in America for everyone to have health care. And there's not just enough wealth, there's more than enough wealth. So when there's really more than enough wealth, and you've got so much wealth that you're just, setting it on fire for fun, buying shoes you don't put on your feet just to show that you have them. Like, what is that about? You're buying Nikes, things like that, basically. But there's so many examples of it, and it's just pervasive across society. It's just this showing off of wealth, and it's pathetic. But it changes when there are people who could be helped so easily with this money that you're not actually using, because you're not putting the shoes on your feet. You're just turning money into shoes, and then you're a Foot Locker employee in your own house. So what I'm suggesting is politicians and politics have proved, the politicians have proved themselves dishonest, untrustworthy, incapable, inept, failing. They've failed at it. You gave them the job, and they're failing at the job. Now, what do you do when someone's failing at a job? Well, you don't just fire them or kill them, because we're civilized. So we don't cut off their heads. In France, a couple of 100 years ago, you cut off these people's heads. That's what you do. They push it so far, they get so extravagant. They revel in their wealth whilst being surrounded by poverty to such an extent that the poor people then chop off their heads. But we're more civilized than that, so we don't do that. Bill Burr wants us to do that. He's joking, of course. But then, I do want to emphasize that it's not just the 1% or the rich people's fault or the politicians' fault. It really is everyone, because you can't blame these people when all you do all day is dream about having money and spend all of your energy trying to get money, and obsessing about clothes and shoes and watches and all these things that are just so blatantly meaningless and just to show off. Like, it's everywhere. But the politicians have proved themselves untrustworthy and inept. Not all of them, but America's the wealthiest country on earth, and not all of the citizens. It's a first world country. Not all of the citizens have clean water. Now, that's the only first world country on earth where when the citizens have some sort of big water problem, it's not just fixed immediately. Like, I come from a first world country, and if the water goes, it just doesn't happen, but if it does, we're shocked and it's fixed immediately. Everywhere. That's for the poor people as well. Because it's a disgrace to be a first world country and not to provide clean drinking water to all of your citizens. That's a disgrace. So that means the government doesn't work. So how long are you going to continue just letting it not work? That's dumb. But it's also dumb to chop off their heads, because you're just as guilty as they are, and they're just humans, and they've been brought up in the American greed matrix, which is now the world greed matrix as well. I'm just America's, you're on stage, America, so you're on the global stage more than anyone. You're making a lot of the biggest decisions, so that's why I focus there. And I focus on America as well because it's so extreme. All the examples of greed are most extreme in America. So you don't tear down your government. You don't kill them all. They're no worse than you are, really, in the grand scheme of things, and that can be proved mathematically. You just realize, this isn't working, so it's got to change. That's what you do when you have a bad employee. You call them over and you talk to them and say, what's going on? I need this, I need that. What you doing? You're stealing from the fridge. You got to stop stealing, And you hope that the employee, you don't immediately fire them. But yeah, the government obviously has to be changed, and the change is obvious. We want to, like, switching to communism is obviously absurd. Communism is great and everything. It's a good idea. But America making that switch is just it's absurd. From one extreme to another, and just, Americans just instinctively don't like communism either. Anyway, but yeah, we have to be more sensible. We have to be much more sensible than the Russians when they instituted communism, because they shouldn't have instituted communism. And Karl Marx should have written a warning at the start of Das Kapital saying, "Do not try this in unstable circumstances." But then the Russians did it in the most unstable circumstances. Pre-World War II, Europe was the most unstable place, or place and time in history. So that's not when you should make a transition to communism. Anyway, it's not communism, because to repeat, it's not about politics, it's about conscience. And it's about accepting that whether we believe in God or not, we all do have a conscience, and it actually pains us to live in such absurd and immoral ways. And that the solution is very easy. We just got to have the courage to take it. So what do? We don't throw away the government. We don't tear it down. We don't kill anyone. We're not savages. Revolutions are just damaging. The revolutions are destructive. You don't have a revolution. You have a slow, peaceful transition that doesn't even start yet, that is preceded by a whole lot of reflection and conversation. And then you experiment with a voting profile, which is like a Facebook profile, but it's for managing your votes. So instead of each American voting once every 4 years, absurd, stupid, totally disempowering, totally unnecessary, because it's 2021. You can vote more often than that. You have TV shows that are dedicated to nothing but voting. So you set up a voting profile. You have to make it secure, obviously. But that's, you trust the internet with your banking. So you can, if you trust it with your money, you'll trust it with anything. So you get the voting profile secure. And then specific votes are suggested by the people. So it's for the people, by the people. The good votes are upvoted and get more attention, and more people vote on them. And then you can be set up in different sections: economics votes, tax votes, all different types of votes. There can be opinion votes and morality votes, and this can be analyzed state to state. So maybe you'll check your voting profile and see, wow, the majority of people in Texas think like this. So, but then when I look at the majority of the people in New York, they think like this. I think I'm going to give New York a try. I might just naturally be much happier there because I think more in line with the majority. And this is totally peaceful, and it will also unite the United States, in that you'll see what unites you, because some votes, some propositions, some ideas will get 90%, 80 or 90% agreement. Okay, and you can get experts on YouTube to help you fill out parts of your voting profile you don't understand. About economics, for example, there could be some YouTuber who explains economics in a way you understand and trust, and then he provides you with the types of suggestions for how you fill out your voting profile that you download, and then just insert a code, and then your economics voting profile is completed in the way recommended by the economist that you trust most on YouTube, for example. So then YouTube will be realized as what it is, which is a parliament, which is, the French word parle is to speak. So YouTube is our modern parliament, where we speak and discuss things in debate. And so you set up to start experimenting with this voting profile. I think it should be kind of unofficial, just like Facebook was. People just, programmers can knock up a something like a Facebook profile in hours. That's nothing for a programmer. People will offer their voting profiles. One of them will catch on. It works very much like Reddit with upvotes and karma. One will catch on, and then you'll start using the information to see because what you basically want to use the voting profile for is to keep your government as it is at the moment, but now using the voting profile, you'll be able to give orders to the government by saying, look, 90% of the country thinks that the government should immediately fix the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Like, drop everything and fix that. And if it means that the politicians can't get their, limos anymore, can't take private jets, or their food budget has to be cut, then it's cut. That's the government's priority because the people say so, and that's how it should be. That's what real democracy is. This is America's second democratic revolution. Remember, you were born out of a democratic revolution. You can do it again, and you need it. And just be honest with yourself. You need it. Your government is corrupt and inept. But again, it's not revolution. I'm talking like a revolutionary now, but I'm not a revolutionary. I'm a slow, peaceful transitionist, following, the Christian moral code, regardless of what religion you are. Christianity is compatible with all other religions, like in terms of how we treat one another. And that is just an emphasis on forgiveness, looking for how things might be your fault more than your brother's fault. Love, compassion, tolerance, and a lack of judgment, understanding that it's up to God to judge people and punish people, and not up to us to judge and punish people. We may need to restrain people sometimes because they might be out of control, but it's not up to us to judge or condemn them, unless they've done something particularly heinous to us in person, in which case we can't help but hate them. But that doesn't mean the state should hate them. Okay. So that's how the voting profile will work. It will make a slow transition to true democracy, where people are actually invested in the politics of their country and can see real change. Because, who are running the country at the moment? The 1%. How does the voting profile defeat the 1%? Well, they're 1%. So they get 1%, every time you vote, it's going to be 99 versus 1. That's how you defeat, it's the clue is in the name. How do you defeat the 1%? By being the 99%. But you have to unite to do that. And the voting profile, the information gathered from the voting profile, will allow you to do that. Okay, so now I know everyone's so cynical these days. It'll be like, oh, this fucking nut, who does he think he is, and blah, blah, blah. But someday the species will do this, at which point, so I know ultimately I'm correct. We either destroy ourselves or we will do this. It's just too obvious. The phones and the internet make it too obvious. The modern world is all about communication and technology and being online, and clearly an online voting profile will eventually take place because democracy is obviously correct, and it's obviously the most Christian way of being. And it will inevitably make the structure of the country, in terms of its systems and institutions, more Christian. Like, people will vote such that, there are lots of poor people, so they'll be voting on behalf of poor people. So poor people have more of a voice, and the middle class people are related to poor people, and they'll vote to help poor people as well. It will only be the mega rich that won't want to help poor people because they want to hoard as much money as they can. So it'll make the country, in terms of its institutions, more Christian, just in a very natural, democratic way. Because the only people who are benefiting from America being as it is, which is an oligarchy, are the mega rich people. But they're very few in number. So the vast majority of the country is suffering. Okay. I think that's enough. So basically, yeah, God is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And even if there is no God, when we genuinely act, just genuinely follow what we think he would suggest us to do, it improves our lives so much. It makes things so much better, so much more logical, so much less chaotic, that it gives us a natural sense of faith that God must exist, because as we deduce his ideas, they make us so much happier and healthier. Okay. So that's basically it. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. Yeah, so basically if a country like America made a concerted, systematic effort at true democracy via a voting profile, and also at more embodying the moral teachings of Jesus Christ, forget about going to church, forget about whether he rose from the dead or walked on the water, forget about that, just what he said. Because if you read the Gospels, you notice that he didn't mention anything about his mother being a virgin or about walking on water or anything like that. He doesn't talk about that. He talks about God and he talks about how humans should treat each other. And if we do try and make it more, to isolate what our problems are, and our problem is just greed, really. There's enough wealth, there's enough to go around, there's more than enough to go around these days, particularly in first world countries. So, and this greed is making us unhappy. This focus on materialism, focusing on things instead of focusing on humans and humanity and saving the planet and helping each other when we fall on hard times. That's the real solution. And it will never get more complicated than that. I don't know what people want, expect to happen, like a new political system that fixes everything somehow. It's just not going to be like that. The universe, for our evolution and for our own good, the universe requires us to make concerted moral effort at being better than we are and living according to our higher self, as opposed to our lower self, which is all about just money, food, sex, and pleasure, and things like that. Okay, so that's the basic idea behind the voting profile and logical, scientific, systematically applied Christianity, which is just how a modern society will systematically organize its institutions and its practices with the values, genuinely trying to make embody the values of forgiveness, tolerance, non-judgment, and things like that. Looking after the sick and the needy. Okay, that's definitely enough. Thanks for listening. All the best. Bye bye.